Islam. Hibu, Haq, Salam, Huriyatun wa Adl. I greet thee. Khalid Amin Rabe, your host. Topic for this tape is the Trinity of Self and the Moorish Great Seal as a practical key to magic. A lot of you Moors listening to this tape have been exposed previously to various esoteric and occult ideas and principles, and usually you will have been exposed to it at the get-go at a very adept and advanced level, dealing with an advanced gnosis. Particularly our mutual friend Blackbeard. If you have not subscribed to his channel already, his name is Blackbeard Mirage. That's Blackbeard, Blackbeard, Mirage, Mirage. He's on my subscription list. And he deals with advanced Moorish gnosis, occult psychology and sociology, adept history, as well as various occult and dark side information that you definitely need to orient yourself with. But he's dealing with it from a very adept level. And he's kind of almost assuming that you've gone through the degrees and watched through his entire playlist and are caught up to speed so with the basics of what the occult and how that whole thing works, so that you can take those higher degrees and apply them to yourself. Even some of the materials that he's suggesting are very advanced materials that assume that you are an advanced occultist and an advanced student, and that you have already been through various different levels of consciousness to be able to even understand and appreciate the depth of information that they're bringing to you. Most of our people have not been seasoned with the salt of wisdom on the very basics, like the 7 principles of Tehuti, where magic comes from, etc. And that's kind of what I want some of this tape to be going over. I mean, the Age of Aquarius was actually ushered in on 2 different fronts. The Age of Aquarius was ushered in through what you would call the New Thought movement, or the Western mystery tradition, which is basically European occultists reviving the ancient sciences that we were dealing with. They were handed some of the keys and allowed to release certain secrets to the public in a very unprecedented manner that had never before been seen in history since the time. It was a dispensation of knowledge, I should say, that wasn't seen since the time that the Moors educated the Europeans and brought on their Renaissance over in the East. So this new resurgence coming through with certain big occultists like H.P. Blavatsky and her Secret Doctrine and the Isis Papers, or the Veil of Isis, or whatever that one's called. Also, Beverly P. Randolph, creating the Rosicrucian Order. Also, other big ones that you know about, Aleister Crowley. But even before him, there was the, the Golden Dawn, the Order of the Golden Dawn, and various other big occult groups. I mean, even ones that you haven't heard of, like the gentleman who established the Builders of the Diadem, was Paul Foster Case. And various occultists, and even ones that weren't so occult, like even gentlemen like we're going to be reading later this tape from a book called The Master Key System, established by Charles Hanel, and he was a 33-degree Master Mason and a Shriner, as well as being a very successful businessman and occultist, and he basically wrote a system for initiation into the higher mysteries of Masonry, which is occult Masonry, building in the mind. But he was allowed to do this for the first time in history when they protect their secrets so well. So, like, you can see that on the European side, they ushered in the Age of Aquarius by bringing to light an entirely new level of consciousness that was not seen before in this kind of strict Christian society. But on our side, we had Noble Drew Ali and Marcus Garvey, who brought in a new age of enlightenment for us, who were fresh out of slavery, enslavement of our minds, and didn't even know what nationalism was, didn't know what our nationality was. They're bringing gnosis for us to bring us out of the dark ages, so to speak. And then continuing the works, we have, of course, C.M. Bay bringing a higher level, bringing us our ancient law, the 12 signs of the zodiac, so we can realign ourselves with the cosmos and go back to our true natural mind. Then we also have this basic timeline. We have, coming out of the Moorish movement, actually, we have the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who continues the works of Marcus Garvey and Noble Drew Ali and implements them better than any more before or since, to be honest. And then you have like Father Allah bringing us the supreme mathematics, taking it to the babies, because the old were stiff-necked and rebellious, giving the supreme wisdom, the supreme mathematics in a form that is readily relatable. And by him actually giving the supreme mathematics to the children in a way they can understand, actually sparked the whole hip-hop movement that's going strong since then, to be honest. But that's a whole other occult history. And then you have like more modern brothers like Brother Bobby Hemmett, the whole lecture circuit, Brother Panic, C. Freeman L., who actually taught Brother Bobby Hemmett, and others, like bringing in our age of Aquarius. And now you have brothers like Blackbeard Mirage, and even myself in a very humble way, bringing certain knowledge to the people that would normally be kept more hush-hush. But this is the age of Aquarius, the dawn of light, as it were, the bucket of secrets being poured out so that a new age can begin, an age of brotherly love talked about thousands of years ago by our good brother, the Aquarian Christ, in the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ. But that's now being ushered in. But the only way that we can have an age of universal brotherhood and love amongst people is by everybody being on the same page as with regards to universal truth. Now, there was a great conspiracy against our nation that in the toppling of our nation, yes, it was a nationalization thing, a legal toppling and a physical overpowering with might. I mean, there were like over 360 years of wars fought on this continent, most of which we've been made to forget based on the historical reconstruction that happened in 1853 to 1865, where they weren't just rebuilding the buildings, they were actually rebuilding the minds and rebuilding the timeline. So we had a lot of history that was taken from us, so that we were made to forget who we are, such that even to this day, most people still identify as Negroes, colored, and blacks, not aware that they have a national identity that ties them back to the beginning of civilization. But the real disconnecting was when they disconnected us from our universal minds and our universal thought process, the sciences that we established to codify the truth. And so I'm actually going to just introduce into the record a bit of evidence. You have one in your pocket. It's a $1 bill, United States, $1 note, I should say, or one note, because a dollar is actually a silver piece. But as you can see, that's actually the Great Seal of the Moorish Nation, the Great Seal of this landmass, North, Central, and South America, actually, the Pyramid of Yucatan, although this is one of the Egyptian pyramids without the steps. And you can see, look, you have the Trinity atop with the Eye of Horus, or the Eye of God, in the center, and then you have the base of the pyramid, but it's disconnected. Now that disconnection is very important. That disconnection means something. You have the Trinity, and I'm going to introduce now into your consciousness the fact that that Trinity is the Trinity of mother, husband, and son, or mother, son, and then child, but it's also the Trinity, the mental Trinity of your superconscious, subconscious, and conscious mind. The science of how your mind works, and that one eye which unites them all, that eye that knows all and sees all and is all, separated from the physical body. So and we'll do a further video going into the full mystery of the $1 bill, because that actually has the full mystery of our present condition as Moors in this country. But just looking there, you can see clearly that there was a disconnection. That Holy Trinity represents the spirit. In the lower part of the pyramid represents the physical body. So the spirit being separated from the physical body represents the mental disconnection of the Moors from their high science, from their God mind, as it were. The absolute God of humanity, of whom there is no debate, is the human conscious, subconscious, and superconscious minds. That is the Holy Trinity, talked about in so-called Christianity. That is the God within, as it were. And the science of how those three interrelate is the science that was used to topple us, and also the science that we will use to resurrect ourselves. If you look at the 5 universal symbols of Islam before you, the compass and the square and the G actually symbolize those 3, that Holy Trinity. Actually, once you get a full understanding, after this tape, hopefully, you'll be able to look over at all the occult knowledge that you've gathered thus far and be able to interpret it based on that Holy Trinity, and then you can get into the practice of what they call magic. Now I'm going to firstly start with giving you the principles of Tehuti, or the ones that are relevant to this video. The first principle of Tehuti is it requires, this is the 0 principle, you could say, but it requires that you believe in something called the all. Now, there is nothing outside of the all. The all is all. That is what you call God, or the Most High, or the unthinkable, the unnameable, the unspeakable. It's also Allah, or Allah, which is basically the one that is outside the circle of time, the nameless one, the old one, the great old one, as it were. And now the all, because there's nothing outside of him, he can't create something outside of himself, because he can't take anything from his own substance to create something with. There's nothing outside of himself to mold into something. So basically, it's supposed that using the second principle, which we'll get into, as above, so below, the way that we create things without taking materials outside of ourselves is in our mind, with our imagination. So it's presupposed that if we are made in the form of the all, then the way that we create is with our minds, and the all also has a mind, or a womb. So the womb of the all is the mind of the all. And you can reference chapter 1 of the Circle 7, where it says basically that man was created as a thought of Allah. Thoughts exist in the mind, etc. So the first principle of Tehuti is that all is mind, the universe is mental. So everything that we're experiencing is actually mental. And if you notice, if you go into the science of it and you realize how you actually experience your 5 senses and experience your physical body and interface with this world, you will realize it's an entirely mental thing. There's nothing really physical about it. Basically, impulses and vibrations coming through the physical nerve centers that are just an extension of the brain along your body that go back into your mind and are interpreted. And then your mind tells you what that is. So that's actually what you would call the matrix, if you want to get technical. The brain, which is the interface between your true self and this so-called outer world. So the first principle is that all is mind, the universe is mental. And the second principle, tying directly in with that, is as above, so below. As within, so without. Basically saying that the principles that apply to the outer world apply to the inner world. The principles that apply to the inner world apply to the outer world as well. And also that the form, the macrocosm, which is basically this outer universe, is the same as the microcosm, which is the physical body and the operator within the physical body. So if there's an intelligent principle that runs this outer universe, the mind of God as it were, then there is an intelligent principle that runs the inner universe as well, which is you, yourself, or your mind, or your Holy Trinity, which we'll get into. The third principle of Tehuti is the principle of vibration. This is very important when you're dealing with the mind, and we'll actually be reading from the Master Key System by Charles Hurnell later, in just a few minutes actually. But vibration is basically the thought. So the mind, the only function of your mind basically is to think. It thinks in several different ways. It has several different varieties of thoughts, and all of those thoughts are basically vibrations. So the mind would be static or potential energy, just a big ball of energy. You can think of it as that, but it's vibrating, it's pulsating, and it's at a state of chaos, or it's at a state of fluidity at first. And then when you solidify it and you direct it towards a purpose, that's where the will comes in, which is one of the first principles of magic, the will. Once the will comes in and directs it to a specific purpose and intention, then it becomes a ray of light or a thought, and that thought takes upon itself the form corresponding with the thought. That's also what they call the law of attraction as well. So, and the fourth principle is of polarity, and this is of very vital importance, because basically the mind itself is singular. There's only one God. That is you. Inside of your body, there's only one God, only one principle. But as it manifests, it takes on different rays. And in order to work, it actually I really want to get into the reading. But firstly, basically, there's three parts of your mind: the superconscious mind, which is the God part, or the infinite potential, the static energy part. And then when it manifests into two poles, like the two poles of a battery. There's the conscious mind, which is the thinking, or the reasoning, or the directing, or the masculine part. And then there's the receptive, or the feminine, or the subconscious mind, which actually takes that energy and molds it into form. So the subconscious mind is actually the womb that molds into form, whereas the conscious mind is actually what directs it. So if you're into the Kabbalah, then you can think of it as the Holy Trinity of Keter, Chokmah, and Binah, with Keter being the superconscious mind, Chokmah being the conscious mind, or the masculine faculty, and Binah being the subconscious mind, or the form molding faculty. So that's actually the Holy Trinity within you. And Chokmah and Binah represent the principle of polarity, which is the second law of Tehuti, which means that everything in this outer universe, as well as your inner universe, manifests in twos. So you have hot and cold, you have yin and yang, you have up and down, side to side, etc. Good and bad, or good and evil, supposedly. But all of these things, they're actually one phenomenon, only manifesting as two in order to produce that friction that causes change. Because as one, there can be really no change. It has to manifest as two for there to be a cycle of evolution. So that's actually something that you use in your magic, or in your creation, understanding that process of change, and so you can polarize yourself at the proper pole to bring forth what you want, and then depolarize the other side so you don't bring forth what you don't want. That goes into more of the practical side. Because I'm already going through them, the fifth law is the principle of rhythm, which is very important. Solomon says it very well in Ecclesiastes, how there's a time and a purpose to everything under the sun. There's a time for growth and a time for death. There's a time for the tide to go out, a time for the tide to go in, etc. Even the rhythms of your body, the cycle of you going to work. You wake up at 7, you bathe, you go to work at 8, you come back at 6, you eat, you go to sleep, you do it again. The sun rising, the sun setting, the waning and waxing of the moon. Everything moves in rhythms, even in your life, and in your subtle life, or your mental life. Everything is also moving in a pattern. So once you understand that pattern, then you can manipulate the rhythm to your will. And there's even a principle where you can isolate that rhythm and fix yourself at a certain rate. So say there's a cycle of wealth and poverty going on in your life. Every time you get some money, you spend that money. Every time you get some money, you spend that money. Then you can actually isolate it, and you can fix your consciousness at the part of you making money, so that you continue to make, but you've frozen the part where you're spending money. But that's the principle of rhythm doesn't go away. You just rise above that ebb and flow, as it were. And by the way, I'm not making these principles up. These are the ancient Egyptian principles of the god Tehuti, given to man for him to understand the basically laws of nature. They can be found in the book The Kabalion by the Three Initiates, or William Walter Atkinson, I believe. Sixth principle is the principle of cause and effect, the jaws of Saturn, as it were. And basically this principle, we know this, it works in the mental realm as well as the physical realm. For every cause, there is an effect. The thought is the cause, the effect is what happens after the thought, or the purpose of the thought. Cause and effect is immutable, there's really no getting around it. And the goal is to be the cause of most of the things that happen in your own life. So everything in your life is basically an effect. The outer world is the effect. The inner world is the cause. So when you're thinking and deliberately, thinking intentionally, when you understand your mental trinity, then you are able to bring forth the effects that harmonize with your desire. When you don't understand that, then the effects are random, chaotic, and governed by the other laws of which you have no understanding, which makes you a slave, to be honest. And we're actually in a system, a corrupt, evil system in this country where we don't understand the causes that are going on behind the scenes, and we've been made powerless or been denied knowledge of ourselves, so that we cannot become the cause of our own upliftment. And so we're thrashing about within the effects, being punished by the effects, not aware of the causes that are happening from others and of how we're causing our own situation at this point as well. And I'm actually going to pause the video. I'm going to restart it because my battery's dying. Peace.